Hey everybody, hope you had a good Easter break. This here, as you can see down below, is a Easter week worth, Easter break or spring break worth or Easter break worth of Sonic entries. Yeah, Sonic fan rants, entries, opinions, you name it. And there have been several. Some have been the same, some are different. There is no doubt about that. But what will surprise you and sorry about the noise in the background, that's the microwave going off, warming me up some coffee. But what will surprise you a little bit is what some people have to say. Now, I know a lot of you are going to probably say, here's more negative crap and all that. The truth is, what are you going to do? A majority of what you read is apparently negative. So, the first one's going to probably be a long one. And this is going to probably be in several parts, so I do apologize. But the first one is going to be a bit of a long one. Yeah, it is. It's going to be a bit of a long one, ladies and gentlemen. So, prepare for that if you must, or if you want to. But the first one is about 247. Basically, this person looks at 247, the most recent issue, which is basically At All Costs, Part 1. They look at 247 as being Archie's equivalent to what is considered as the worst Sonic game of all time, and that's Sonic 2006. And I'm pretty sure this individual is not the only one that looks at this and thinks that same way. Because I'm pretty sure there's other fans out there that feel exactly the way this fan does. But feels exactly the way this fan does. And what do I mean? Well, if I can get back to it. This person posted this about 21, almost 22 hours ago. About 22 hours ago, just about. At this time frame, which is right now 12:55. But they posted this about 22 hours ago as of this time frame. And this is what they said, and I quote, "Before I go into anything else this month, I'd like to update you guys on a rather big bombshell that happened in the Penders case." And they're also talking about the lawsuit situation. "Apparently it's become known that unless Archie can turn things around and win within a few days, Penders instantly wins the lawsuit and gets full control of his characters to do with as he sees fit. In fact, Penders himself has already gone on record as saying that was his novel in the works as an event and is an eventuality now and not just a possibility. Essentially, this means that either the characters erased from the comic are going to be gone for good if Archie fails to win, or Archie will be forced to pay Penders royalties in order to be allowed to use them in the comic from that point on, which is highly unlikely since Archie themselves are the ones that decided to remove these characters in the first place. This also means that reprints and other back issues could be nearly impossible to produce as well. Not only this, but if Flynn does not end up winning this lawsuit, Flynn, they put Flynn instead of Penders. They meant Penders, not Flynn. Okay, not only this, but if Penders does end up winning this lawsuit, he can then go directly over to Sega and EA and sue them next over the Sonic Chronicles game and cause havoc for them as well as Archie. Can anyone see why I plead so hard for the comic to just reboot from scratch already, with only the characters that can easily use and in the forms they want to use them in, instead of all this mutilation and bad writing to explain everything? Now to continue on. Now for the big topic of this month's journal. That being that I've noticed extreme similarities between this 2-year mess of an arc and what is believed to be the worst Sonic game of all time, Sonic 2006. Which of course doesn't bode well for the future of the comic as well. But as usual, instead of just making random claims without explaining why I feel that way, let's dive into this mess with my top 3 reasons. The first similarity I can make between the comic 2006 is the completely unnecessary and harmful redesigns being implemented without much care about the characters being messed with. I'm sure for 2006 you guys all know what I'm talking about. Dr. Robotnik. In this game, they decided to take the Robotnik we all know and love to hate, and make him look like a completely normal old man who was relatively thin, and you could even see the eyes between his glasses, as well as other atomically correct features that made people cringe. Now, sure, it might have made sense to Sega to go this direction with him, since they wanted to just make Robotnik look like the rest of the humans that inhabited the world, and just tacked on a few of his features like the clothes and mustache to say, hey, it's still Robotnik, just redesigned. However, they failed to realize how iconic Robotnik was, and the fact that he was also called Eggman for the shape of his body, and simply the fact that they didn't want Robotnik to just be another human, but to continue to stand out and be original and unique compared to all the other humans. Essentially, they messed with an iconic figure and ended up getting burned for it, since far too many people just couldn't get in line with this new, thin, creepy old man. Hold on, excuse me. Had to get some coffee there. Now, continuing on, this individual's journal, a rant, if you will, and I quote, "Now, I really don't think I have to explain much about Archie's completely unnecessary redesigns, but in a nutshell, we, supposedly, since it's not official yet, have Sally essentially dressed in her Mecha Sally prison clothes as her new design and shaved off cheek fur. Bunny, essentially a slave of Robotnik now, as she ran off to join her uncle, who's one of the main leaders of Robotnik's forces, and legionized herself, also no more cheek fur. And Antoine, who is believed will become a cyborg soon enough, and lose his everyman status to become a fighting robot along with Bunny. Now, many people claim that the redesigns aren't changing the characters themselves, but just the look. But the very story being used to change the designs is actually doing quite a lot of harm to the personalities. I mean, you take the tomboy Sally and suddenly make her care about fashion over practicality. You take Antoine, who was the normal guy that put everything in perspective and ground us into the reality to how nuts the events going on are, and suddenly superpower him up to cyborg status. Most importantly of all, you take Bunny and make her go from turning lemons into lemonade with her robotic parts, and suddenly turn them into a drug and addiction that she can't live without, and has no right being a main character unless she's part robotic. I'm sorry, but mix these along with taking out iconic features like a cheek fur. Tails has it, so why can't these guys, who have been around almost as long as he has anyway? And you most definitely are screwing over the characters and not just making them look different. If the story used was simply something like Sally getting clothes as a present from Sonic or her family, that's one thing. But to wear the prison clothes she got as a slave to Robotnik, mutilating her body. Okay, no, hold on. Let me rephrase that. But to wear the prison clothes she got to. But to wear the prison clothes she got as a slave to Robotnik, mutilating her body. I just can't go along with that. And a Sally that can happily do so is not the real Sally, but just an alternate dimension Sally, or a mannequin built to look like her, to do whatever the writer wants her to do. Now people keep saying that it's pointless and stupid to complain about this stuff since it hasn't happened yet, and that Flynn has better plans in the works than my worst fears. But this leads up to my second reason for why these two are so similar. Corporate intervention along with bugs and glitches. Now if asked why Sonic 2006 was such a horrible mess of a game, what would be the obvious answer to this? Quite simply, that the game was released a year or two earlier due to the developers wanting it released for Sonic's 16th anniversary, while the higher-ups demanded it be released for the 15th anniversary instead. As a result, we got a broken down, messed up, glitch and bug-infested game that was horribly designed, very clunky, and essentially destroyed the core of any Sonic game, the gameplay. Without good gameplay, a Sonic game can't survive due to how generic and mediocre the characters and stories are that inhabit them. So by having all of these glitches, it's quite easy to see why it was so badly hated. However, how can this be compared to a comic which is all story and no gameplay? It's quite easy actually. The story itself, for nearly the last 2 years, has been a patched together salvaging mess of a story that's been rushed in areas that needed to be taken slowly, stretched out in parts that have bored people to tears, and had to be rewritten at the near last second as the lawsuit, Sega, and Archie themselves forced horrific changes into the comic that have vastly changed the direction the comic was going to take. Does anyone wonder why the Krazood hybrid Hydra plotline makes absolutely no sense? And why it feels like a plot ripped out of Flynn's rear end as a Deus Ex Machina to try and fix multiple plot lines at once? How about why Team Metal was such a horribly disappointed and crappy plot point that ended so anticlimactically and easily? How about why is it so many characters are acting so out of character and doing such stupid things they would never do if they acted like themselves instead of someone else entirely? The reason for the Krazood is because it was created last second. Since originally the Krazood wasn't even supposed to be part of the storyline whatsoever. Flynn's original idea for de-robotizing Sally was completely different, and other plot points have been radically changed from the original goal. As well as the rushed plot points like Team Metal and Bunny. Need I remind you that we had the Genesis arc, the insulting game cash-in for 242, and the hopefully awesome crossover happening next in the comics. Essentially, this means that a total of 9 issues were ripped out of the comic and replaced with complete pointless filler crap that nobody cared about yet. Yet it was apparent that Flynn was hoping to de-robotize Sally at the 250 mark, yet instead had to push it back to around 252. This means, at the very least, half a year was erased, and I'll be back in a second.